And welcome back to Backspace Academy. In our first EC2 lab, we launched an EC2 Linux instance and we were running a WordPress application on that. And we used a username and password to log into that instance. Now, that's great because as a WordPress administrator, we can create blog pages, we can change menus, we can upload images, we can do all of that stuff that you would do through the WordPress application. But what happens if we want to actually change the WordPress application itself? We want to change one of the PHP files. We want to change one of the configuration files. To do that, we need to connect into the Linux operating system that is running our WordPress application. So to do that, we can connect remotely into our EC2 server using Secure Shell, and that will give us direct access to the Linux operating system. Now, this is a hands-on demonstration, so I'm going to show you how it's done, but I don't expect you to do this yourself. It's not a lab, and it goes a little bit beyond what you need to know for a cloud practitioner, but you still need to know that you are able to access Linux servers using Secure Shell, or Windows servers using remote desktop protocol. So what we'll do is we'll launch an EC2 instance and then we'll create a key pair and download that key pair, and we're going to use those credentials to access this EC2 Linux server. Okay, so starting off in the EC2 management console, I'll just very quickly go through what we've already done. We launch an instance. We'll select the AWS Marketplace as before. We'll search for WordPress. We'll select WordPress certified by Udemy. Continue. We'll select a T2 micro because it's on the free tier. We'll select next. We'll auto-assign a public IP because we want to access this over or through a browser. We'll click next, add storage. Next again. We're just going to add a tag, just a name for this. Now name has to be capital N. And we'll just call it SSH test. And next. Now the Bitnami AMI has recommended or has listed some recommended rules for a security group here. So we've got here HTTP and HTTP access, as you would expect for a WordPress web server. But there's also one there for SSH on port 22. So that means that we can access, if we use this security group, we can access from anywhere on port 22 and get direct access to our Linux operating system. And we can see here we can access from any IP address, but we still need security credentials to do that. But it is also a good idea, and it is certainly recommended, if you have a static IP address that you're connecting from, to use my IP. And that way, anyone else from any other IP address cannot access this instance. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. But in a real situation, you'd probably lock that down to your IP address, and it'll come up with a warning as well later on. So just click on Review and Launch. And there we go. It's telling us that on port 22 and some others, we've got open to the direct or open to all IP addresses. We know about that. It's not a major concern for us. We're going to shut this down straight away anyway. So we just click on Launch. Now I'm going to create a new key pair. And I'm just going to give that key pair a name, test maybe, whatever. And I'll just download that key pair now. Now this key pair is really important. You need to save it somewhere, and you generally use the same key pair most of the time for groups of instances that you're launching. If you lose this key pair, you will never be able to access the EC2 instances that you've created. So it's very important. You cannot get this again off AWS. You can only get it now. Once you click on Launch Instances, you won't be able to get that back again. So I'm just going to click on Launch Instances. Okay, so after about 10 minutes or so, we've got our WordPress application up and running, and we've got these status checks all completed and okay. So we can now go to that public IP address again and have a look at our WordPress application in our browser. And there it is. And as before, we can log into it if we have our username and password. So again, as before, we're going to go to Actions. We go to Instance Settings and get the system log. And that will be all of the console output from our Linux operating system. So we'll scroll down to the bottom and we'll get our password there. And our application or our username will be user. So let's scroll down and we'll log in. And we'll use user and password. And we'll log in, and that'll get us into the administration page or the administration dashboard of our WordPress application. So that's great. So just close out of that now. But what happens if we want to get in and we want to play around with some of these configuration files? So what we need to do now is that we need to connect to our Linux operating system. So the easiest way to do that if you're running on Windows is to use a Bash client that will allow you to run Bash or Unix Bash commands on a Windows operating system. If you're using a Unix environment such as Linux or Unix type environment such as Mac, then you'll be able to just use that through your terminal application, provided you navigate to where your key pair is located. So I'm just going to jump into where I've put my key pair, and here it is, my test PM key pair, and I've just downloaded that to my OneDrive. Now, if I've got Windows for Git installed, and you just go to windowsforgit.org, or sorry, Git for Windows. So if you go to gitforwindows.org and you download that and install it, what it will have is it will have a Git bash here option when you right click on your file explorer. So if you click on that now, or I'm just going to click on that now, and it's going to give me a Unix type input screen or Unix type terminal there. So what I can do now is I can run Unix type commands here. So I'll just click on connect here, and that will give me the SSH command that I need to connect to my Linux operating system. So if I paste that in there now and I click enter, and there we go, it's connected me into my operating system. Now I've connected into this before. There will be another part before that will ask you to say yes or no. You just type in yes to accept that key pair or those credentials, and that will get you straight into the Linux operating system. So from here, we can just do a ls command, and we can see all of our files and directories that are there. Now, instead of downloading the Linux console log or system log, we could actually log in like this, and we can get our credentials for that or for our WordPress application here by just having a look at it. So we can just see here, we can do VI and bitnami_credentials. And there we can see we've got our default username and password is user, and there is our password. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this hands-on demonstration. It's not a lab. I don't expect you to do this yourself, but you do need to remember that you can connect in remotely to EC2 instances. If it's a Linux instance, you can do that using Secure Shell on port 22. If it's a Windows Server instance, you can do that on port 3389 using Remote Desktop Protocol or RDP. So what we'll do now is we'll just exit out of this, and that will close that connection. And of course, the next thing we need to do is to terminate our instance. So again, actions, instance state, and terminate. So that brings us to the end. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.